Hello and welcome to Cherry Red TV. In today's programme we'll be doing another in our series looking at the work of some of the music industry's organisations. And today we're focusing on the MMF, that's the Music Managers Forum. And with me in the studio to do that today I have their Chief Executive Jon Webster. Hi Jon.
Good afternoon.
Now before we get into the MMF itself, you have your own illustrious history in the music industry. So can you give us a brief resume of your career before you joined the organisation?
I chose where I went to university and where there were Virgin record stores because I'd never seen one. And I went to Birmingham University and the first social thing I did was to go and find the Virgin record store. And it felt like I'd come home. It was fantastic. 1972, aircraft seats. I befriended the people there. I spent 2.5 years of my 3 years at university organising gigs and reviewing albums for the university newspaper and going to loads of concerts. And when I left, I had no idea what I was going to do. And a weekly circular memo came round whilst I was working in the shop on the day that the Pink Floyd played Nebworth in 1975, and all the shop staff, the three of them, had gone off to see the Pink Floyd, leaving the shop in charge of the Saturday person and 2 temporary assistants, one of which was me. They had a circular said they wanted an assistant manager in Hull. On Monday I rang up my mate who ran Birmingham and said, do you think I could get this job? On Tuesday I had the interview, which consisted of, Tim says you're a good bloke, what music do you like? And the following Monday I started a temporary job with Virgin Retail and never worked for anyone else for 17 years. And then I went to retail. I moved to which was fantastic all through the punk period when you started as well, Cherry Red started. I moved to the label in 1981, had various positions there, international, sales, marketing. I ended up as managing director when EMI bought it in 1992. I knew it was going to change, and it did change, obviously, from a fairly free-thinking setup where we could do what we liked to one that was run by the accountants of EMI. And I worked with them until 1991 as a consultant, working with their bigger acts that I got on with, the managers, which we'll come back to, I'm sure. Genesis, Peter Gabriel, UB40, and then in 1991 Ken Berry got fired from Virgin EMI because he went off to run EMI, and we all got fired with him. And I became a manager because what else do you do when you're that age with no other qualifications, for a while. And then I went to work for the BPI for 3 years as their independent labels person. And then 2 years ago I saw the light and realised the future was manager centric and moved over to run the MMF. And that's it.
So which acts were you working with when you were a manager?
I managed some unsigned acts, and doing that was probably the most soul-destroying thing I've ever done in my life. I managed Francis Dunnery, who used to be the lead singer of It Bites, and we set up his own label together. I managed D-Note, Matt Wynn, who's a sort of dancey, trance, jazzy bloke, for a while. We had a hit in Belgium, and which that was in 2003, and the royalties are still coming. She proved that. Did I manage anyone else? No, I thought about it, but I don't know. I'm not certain I was particularly cut out for management. I think I'm better at organising things and running things than actually managing people.
And you kind of made that transition from working in the more commercial sector of the industry to the organisational side. Was it a difficult move to move from that one set to another?
I don't think I found it difficult because I'd been out of actually running a label for a while, and I think I was aware of quite a lot of the different parts of the industry and what was going on. In the 90s I'd written a column for Music Week magazine, a personal column, and in that I covered quite a lot of bases, I suppose. So, I mean, I'd been quite critical of the BPI in my columns in Music Week, and I think they felt that it was better that I was inside the tent peeing out than outside the tent peeing in.
And do you think you'd ever go back to the commercial side now, or do you think you found your natural fit on the organisational side.
I'm too old. They don't take people of my age unless they're people who run their own businesses. They don't. They value youth too much. And I don't think I'd like it these days. I think it's very different. It's much more, I find it much more clinical, I think, rather than passionate.
So moving on to the MMF itself, we're going to discuss aspects of its work in a little bit more detail later on, but can you give us sort of an introduction to the organisation and who it represents?
Well, we represent music, as it says on the tin, music managers, which is mostly managers of artists, but also managers of producers and even songwriters, actually. Although the producers and songwriters tend to manage artists as well. We're a trade body. We're very small. We are there to represent the views of our members to relevant parties, which mostly is government, I guess, and anyone who's interested in liaising with us. We represent managers, but through them we represent their artists as well. It's only recently that we've launched the Featured Artists Coalition to give artists a bigger voice. We educate. I think there is a lot of scope for education of young managers. And we provide facilities and benefits for those members, really. I think that's the basic thing.
So in terms of the actual scope of the membership, is it literally going from people managing some of the biggest acts in the world to a guy that's just started managing his mate's band playing in a local pub, or is it a bit narrow? It covers the whole...
It goes the whole gamut, really. We have, the managers of Radiohead at the moment. He's our chairman, and The Verve, Jazz Summers, and, Arctic Monkeys, they all were sitting on the council. And right down to the guy who's just started and wants to learn. What is interesting, I think, in the digital age is that it's never been easier or cheaper to make a recording, and then to get it out there, either digital or physical form. So there's all these people making recordings and all having watched X Factor and everything else and seen how successful you can be, and they all want managers. But there aren't enough managers because I think people are slightly scared of it. They don't understand the process. They don't understand what they need to know. A lot of people have become managers in the past by being the ugly bass player who got kicked out, or the drummer's brother who happened to have a car and then had to be the one who used to go and try and get the 50 quid off the promoter, and became managers like that. And we always say that I think that you need to have that commitment and you need passion, and we can teach you the rest, pretty much, the basics, what you need to know about other industry organisations, what you need to sign up to, the legalities. We can teach you that. But I think people need confidence to try to do that. And I think, one of the things we're going to start shortly is an induction day course that basically says this is everything you need to know, or everything you could need to know to start you off being a manager. So if you're thinking about it and you're just thinking, I don't know about it, we can teach you.
And do you think that the organisation has kind of brought more formality to the manager's role? In the past, it's maybe had something of an undeserved, bad reputation of the guy that's creaming, creaming money off the top while the artist gets nothing, or something like that.
I think the Managers Forum was set up in 1992, and one of its stated aims is to introduce more professionalism. It doesn't stop, unfortunately, sometimes managers nicking acts off other managers, but then that's always going to be the case. It's not that different from record companies trying to sign other record companies' acts when they're successful, or publishers. It's just that the contracts for record companies and publishers are much more enforceable. A management contract is a personal services contract, and it's effectively unenforceable. The only thing you can do if someone nicks your act is to do a deal for damages, effectively. But you can't say to an actor, I've got a contract, I must manage you. They're just going to go, as they do, bye. And of course that happens all the time, and we don't. It's not something we like necessarily, but it unfortunately is a bit of a way of the world.
I think you've worked quite hard to develop kind of template artist manager contracts, haven't you? That kind of bring that a little bit more understanding on both sides to that arrangement.
We're constantly trying to do that. I mean, we do have a short form agreement. I mean, I always say to people who ring up, particularly, unsigned bands who are just developing, and they go, oh, I need a contract with my manager, or vice versa. Well, you could spend thousands of pounds on doing that and get to the point and then break up. We recommend that you sign, we have a short form, like 2-page agreement that says, I am the manager, I will do this. You are the artist, you will do that, and you will pay me this. And we say, do that. And then if you're getting somewhere after a year or 2 years, then negotiate a proper agreement. But I've seen it too often. People literally spend thousands of pounds or a year negotiating an agreement, and then it all falls apart. Yeah. Just all that gets richer are the lawyers.
And as you said before, education is quite a key part of your work. Introducing new skill sets and industry knowledge to managers. I think that was something to be very crucial at the grassroots level.
I think education it has to be. I mean, we run with the Music Publishers Association a number of courses every year designed to increase people's knowledge. Obviously, not only managers, but people within the industry. I think people need to understand what a manager does. But of course, I suppose the other thing is that managers are very different. They go from just a pure business manager to the complete personal services manager, and all the range in between. I mean, what was the famous story of, I think it was Peter Mensch, manager of AC/DC, is it AC/DC? Metallica and that, who was rang by one of his artists who said, I want to go on holiday. He said, so call a travel agent. Put the phone down, Whereas, I've met managers recently, one of our managers, and I've rang him up and said, what are you doing? He said, I'm trying to find a flat for my artist to buy, and it's like, well, that's barely a management role in some ways, but it is a personal management role. So there are huge differences in the way that people operate and the way that they want to operate. I don't think it's telling tales out of school, but someone famously like Van Morrison expects you to be on call 24/7, 365, nothing but, it's just, that's the way he operates. Other people, when I managed Dino, there would be a month or two, probably wouldn't talk to him. It was, if he was writing or something, there wouldn't be any point almost. Yeah. So it varies an awful lot, and I think that's what since I've been at the MMF, even with experience of dealing with managers before, it's really shown that there is no template for a manager.
Yeah.
And as such, I think you can teach people the basics, as I said, the legalities, what they need to join, and then you can take their levels of knowledge up as they need in each sector. But it's rare, you find managers who know everything. Well, actually, you probably don't. Right across they've all come out of one area. One famous one I worked with, Tony Smith, managed Genesis, came from being a live promoter. So he knows all about that. But other things, particularly people of that generation, perhaps they've come into the internet age and they've been in an era when you controlled everything about your artist, and suddenly you're faced with, I don't have any control. The internet's changed all that, or in certain areas, and that's quite difficult. The other quote that I think it was Franz Ferdinand's manager said a couple of years ago, he said, I used to have to know 5 things, now I have to know 50 things. And it really is like that these days. It's not just I used to deal with the record company, the agent, and the record company and publisher, effectively. Or there may be merchandise, but now it's digital service providers, all these people, all sponsorship brands, all doing different things and linking all these things together. It takes a lot, No,
it's a very, very fluid
it is
area, isn't it?
And I think that, people have said that the manager's moving to centre stage. In many ways, the manager always was, but the public persona, I think, or the perception of the industry was that the record label was the centre of the world. And that was because they provided money, mostly, expertise and distribution, I suppose, and that's what's changed. It's not that the manager has come up. I think the record company's role has changed, and so the manager's role is more prominent, perhaps.
Yeah.
You know.
Given that you've got that kind of diverse set of personalities and knowledge, how important has the organisation been in providing a forum for them to come together and share their problems and solutions in a way that they weren't able or maybe minded to do in the past?
Well, I think that's what why it was instigated in the first time. I think it was formed in the city when apparently, famously, Maurice Oberstein was in one room ranting on about how record companies were going to do X, Y, and Z, and there was managers in the other room going, "We can't let him do this. This is crazy." And it was about control, I think, about how record labels still wanted to remain in control, as they often do. And whilst it's not necessarily about sharing details of contractual arrangements and things like that, it is sharing details of the principles of things. I mean, yes, I was gamekeeper turned poacher, but I can't justify the 25% CD packaging deduction still existing. I was there when it was introduced. It was right at the time. I think nowadays contracts say we'll do this and then the cost will go down, it will disappear as soon as it gets to a 20% level. But those things have to be represented, I think, collectively. It's big managers can do something about it, but for lots of smaller managers to stop them being subjected to the vagaries of all parts of the music business, then that's collectivisation has to be one of the prime things that we do. And that does mean managers sharing knowledge and sharing secrets, and it's maybe something they haven't done before, but there seems to be a time of openness and that people are willing to do things like that. Those things have changed, I think. So it's good to see that. At the same time, though, it is not easy getting the 350 members we have and about the 250 other managers that we're well aware of all moving in the same direction. No. Because, I mean, famously, you tell a manager to do something and you just go, no, and do the opposite. They are slightly contrary in that way.
And part of that sort of collective voice is at government level, as you said. I mean, how crucial is it that managers as a body are represented at that level, and what kinds of issues are you generally lobbying on?
I think it is crucial. I mean, to counteract the heavy voices, I suppose. I don't want it to be. This is not meant to be anti-just record company, but I think without a doubt, when I moved to the Music Managers Forum, I said to the council, I said, "So, who are your enemies then?" And they went, "Labels."
That was a good opening gambit.
And I said, "Not the publishers then?" And they said, "No, the publishers are sorted out." Because there was that court case, I think the Macaulay Schroeder court case 30 years ago, and the Elton John one, where a lot of that was got out the way. A lot of the iniquities in the contracts were levelled out and things became a much more level playing field. And I think that's where some of the record contracts particularly are still not as open or as transparent as they should be. And as such, and the BPI is also, the Record Industries Trade Body, has become the de facto voice for the industry in many ways. People still go there just for their first point of call. So I think that needs a bit of balancing, and there is a vast amount of ignorance, I think, both in government and the media still about how the music industry works. Not just the record industry, but all the music industry. They just don't understand it sometimes, and some of the things that we find wrong, like assignment of copyright as opposed to licensing of copyright, and things like that, they don't seem to be bothered about. I suppose it was crystallised by the term extension debate, where we were slightly painted as being the villains of the piece. But also, we weren't anti-term extension. We just wanted term extension on a way that fairly rewarded the artist. And that is not giving the record companies another 45 years of copyright where they don't release records, they lock them up, where they fail to pay decent royalties on old contracts. And they're the main two things, I think. And so that's why what we were fighting for and why we didn't really come to an industry agreement. The musicians' union, they got their 20% pot. They were laughing. Well, they're earning, 3, 4, 5 times much what the featured artists get. That's crazy. And we very firmly believe that content should not be locked up. I mean, Cherry Red, prime example of people who put content out, and very well, that shouldn't be the case. And record companies have got to change their models to deal with that. And I think they also have to be a lot more pragmatic about it. A lot of the time they often don't know what they own, but they should do a deal. No one's going to, if they think they own it and someone comes to you and they think you own it and they want to license it off you, the fact that you haven't got a contract from 1963 is not the end of the world. Everyone believes you own it, so do it, because no one else is coming out of the woodwork saying you own it, and people are, creators and record companies, are missing out on income on things like that. So that's what we would argue, things like that, and so therefore we're representing the voice of the artists as well as the managers, really, in that debate.
Now, you've just completed quite a major consultation of your entire membership, of their opinion of how the organisation should develop going forward. What was kind of behind the thinking of doing that?
Well, what happened was, I think we were accused, possibly partly rightly, of being a sort of old boys club. We weren't very open in the way that we dealt with the, I suppose, new managers. It wasn't obvious what we did for people, and there were a group of managers who sort of got together and went, well, we need to be represented, but the MMF aren't for us. And it's funny because you still sit there and say, well, what was wrong with it? And they don't actually know, but they just know that it wasn't right for them. So they wanted to form another organisation. In the meantime, Jazz Summers had been our previous chairman for 4 years and had done a lot to raise the profile of the organisation. His term had come to an end. We wanted Brian Message, who manages Radiohead and people, to take over, but he would only do it if the organisation became much more inclusive. So that's what he stood as chairman to do. We had a big meeting where we got what was effectively the old guard and the rebels, for want of a better word, in a room, and said, right, what are we going to do? And, it was pretty unanimous that it would be stupid to have two organisations. We know the record industry body has two organisations, which is, you can understand why it happened, but it probably wasn't the best move in the world, really. There are two music managers forums in Australia, for instance, which is a bit crazy as well, but that's down to personalities, I think. So Brian stood up there at the Heaven meeting and said, right, we need to reorganise and revamp this organisation. I want you to give me 6 months to look at it. I will come back to you with a plan about how we're going to change things. And basically we spent 6 months looking at all the areas, and he came back with a plan. And we had another meeting on June the 2nd where everyone said, yeah, that sounds good, what you want to do. I think, to be honest, he thought at that point he could probably go, right, I've done my bit, now I'll leave it to someone else. But I don't think anyone else was sitting in the wings waiting to go, yes, I'll be chairman. So he's still chairman and seems to be enjoying it. And we are developing the sort of strands that we need for the future to provide a better organisation for managers in the 21st century. We want to make the MMF that it's a no-brainer. It's so obvious to join that you just wouldn't not do it, basically.
Yeah. And it seems like funding was quite a big concern that came back on the survey, and I think you've recently made quite a big breakthrough on that.
Well, funding of enterprises, yes. I mean, it's always been a big issue. you go to people who have money, particularly banks, and they laugh at you a lot of the time because you don't have any tangible assets. You only have copyrights and things like that, and they don't really understand monetization of that, or they didn't for a long time. The EC have allocated funds for investment in creative industries. What has changed, I think in the past people have tried to access money like this and failed because of the non-tangibility of assets. But we are in a situation that the banks are not in a great shape, and the creative industries are one of our premier industries. But they need investment. Record companies are not doing, particularly the majors, are not doing as much investment as they used to do. They're not doing as much development, and I'm not saying I blame them because it's a challenging time. So what Brian did was, in conjunction with, he asked Fergal Sharkey at UK Music to find out where this money had gone, and we did. It was one of those things that it took a lot of digging. People were going, I don't know where that went. It's like €1 billion or something. And the banks have got it. And they are meant to be lending it to the creative industries, but they almost don't know how. They don't know. So Brian has gone to them and with UK Music and some other people and said, we have to set up a system to deal with this. We can't just not. We've got to bring the banks with the money and the creative entrepreneurs together and say, right, we need your money, lend it to us. So that's effectively what's happening, and we're at the early stages of doing that, but we are gradually unlocking all the doors, and I think we're going to get to a point where we will act as a conduit for SMEs, small and medium enterprises, to come through us, particularly managers, obviously, but everyone, and we will give them advice on their business plans and then say, that's what a bank wants. We're not going to sit here and go, that's the best act I've ever heard, or that's the worst, you're not going forward. We're just going to say, look, we don't care what the act is like, but that as a business plan, and it's going to rely on, will the act be successful at the end of the day? Or maybe in the Cherry Red scenario, can you make a living out of reissuing albums and doing things like that? That's a fair business plan as well. Yeah. So that's what our role in it's going to be, is to unlock a lot of those doors. And Brian is very driven on these things, so hopefully we'll get there on that.
And it was interesting. I was reading some of the other results of the survey, and it said that I think over 70% of your membership were expecting that less than 50% of their overall revenues in the next year would come from sales of recorded music. So I guess there's now a very crucial role that you're playing in developing knowledge in other areas, be it the live side, merchandising, licensing, relationships with brands, etc. It's really branching out now.
Well, I think, as I said before, you used to have to know the record company, the publisher and the agent, and it's not as simple as that anymore. We are very concerned about the brand relationship because many people over the years have said, brands don't understand music and music understand brands, and they've tried to bring them together. But what they've probably all started from the wrong place, and the record company has a role to play, but at the end of the day, it's down to the artist and the manager about if they're going to go down any of these routes. So what we're saying is you might as well start there, because if you've got a brand and an artist and a manager, okay, we want to work together, but we have these recording copyrights and these publishing copyrights which are part of it, that entity, it's pretty easy to pull that in and say, we have money here we can work this out. If it goes the other way, to the record company or the publisher first and then to the manager, it depends what the relationship is in that situation, I think, between the record label or the publisher and the artist and manager. But a lot of the time people were just throwing them on these emails or faxes, just throwing them on the floor, and don't want to do that. And I think it was also because it was not creative enough. We've seen that recently, where if you actually sit down a brand with the artist and the manager and say, what do you want? What do you want to achieve? What do you want to achieve? How can we bring this together? And it doesn't always work, but so that's one of the parts we're saying, and we're sort of calling it data and translation. We have to know who our members are, what they'll do. And we expect the phone calls from Oh, hello, this is Tesco. Can we have Radiohead to do an ad for us? No, but you can have one, two, these five if you want, because they're all on to it or whatever. So that's the basic idea of that. The brands thing. I mean, people assume there's this huge assumption that, oh, well, make all our money from live. Well, lots of bands don't make money from live, not until they get to well up the chain, and then they do make a lot of money. So we're working on that. One of the initiatives you probably referred to, we're about to do a deal with Mama Group to abolish merchandise fees in their venue. This has been a huge bugbear for acts playing venues where they take 25% or up to 25% of the merchandising income for doing nothing, effectively. Yeah. Now, we don't mind paying them when they're providing a service. If they're selling it, doing a credit card transaction, that's fair enough. But to be charged a large amount of money for having a bit of space for 3 hours is, we don't think, fair. So Mama Group have been quite proactive and said, we'll do a deal with you to get rid of that, and hopefully we can do that with other people. So it is maximising that live thing, introducing sponsorship if it can be done in the right way. Again, that's not an easy thing, but that's all part of the brand relationship. And the price of recording music is falling. I mean, I don't think anyone can deny that. We'd like to see more money from digital, as I'm sure everyone would, but these are tough times and tough issues to deal with. So, yeah, we do expect that to drop. I think there's going to be a bottom to it to a certain extent. I personally don't believe that CDs are going to disappear or that the price is going to drop completely to zero very shortly. But there again, we all said that about things like the cassette. Oh, it won't disappear overnight, and just went, didn't it? One day off a cliff.
I think there's some firm stances that have to be taken at some point on all sides.
Yeah.
To not allow that to happen.
Well, exactly. I mean, the problem is, my personal view is that the whole digital thing is that technologically you are not going to stop people getting music for free. That's not going to happen. It's a moral issue. It really is a society issue because it's now affecting everyone else. I'm out friendly yesterday from America. All the newspapers are closing down. We have journalism in the UK that is, well, pretty poor at the moment because they can't afford to pay people because not enough people are buying them. So all these people are getting free content online, but someone has to generate it and be paid. I mean, it was interesting in the paper recently, there was the Pirate Bay guy going, basically, people should get everything for free. And a lot of people writing back going, artists can't live on nothing. And it's not artists, it's artists and investors in talent. And it's a really, really tough issue, It's not, and we've been in the front line, but it's now hitting photography, it's hitting journalism, it's hitting film. Games seem to have managed to stay out of it in some way. But it's interesting, isn't it, that people like Sky have managed to keep hold of the control in a pretty big way.
Yeah.
Whereas we don't seem to be able to do it. I don't know how they've done that technologically, but they seem to have done it.
I think in your sector, though, there's some quite exciting developments in the way that people are kind of looking at keeping that control, and in particular how they relate to their fan base and people like Terry McBride and Network. I mean, probably the most high-profile example of a manager developing his service to become the label for the artist as well and the publisher and going direct to their fan base, and really building that relationship.
Well, that almost is, it's almost sort of bypassing the moral argument because, I think he refers to it as collapsed copyright, where he owns, or him and the artist own all the rights that you need to do something like that. And I think, it's what Radiohead did. What Radiohead did, they didn't give an album away. Well, they did give an album away, but what they did do was reach out to their fans and say, here it is, you can have it. If you want to pay for it, you can pay for it. If you want to buy a CD later or come to a gig or buy this £40 box set, you can. And we're trusting you to deal with us in an open and honest way. And I think that's what is happening. I mean, it was fascinating, the Radiohead experiment in that way. They've really boosted their audience, apparently, live, so they're making money back there. But it's not only about that, it's about developing that long-term relationship. And I think that's where it's all going to go, where we are at conflict, I think, with people like the people who sit round the table at UK Music, and that is that, well, I mean, we're just putting a thing to the Digital Britain thing saying it's not a threat, it's an opportunity. And you are going to lose some. There's no question. There will be the 10% who will always take things free. That's always going to happen.
Yeah.
But you also have to reach out to people. You have to give them something, and you have to trust them to a certain extent to engage with you and pay for things. And they do. They do. So these, I always maybe it's not quite a good parallel, but it's like when you put all those films on TV of battery chicken farms, and everyone goes, "Oh, that's awful! Oh, no, that's awful!" And then Friday you walk into the supermarket. Here is a battery hen at $1.99. Here is a free range hen at $4.99. Which one do you want? I think I'll have that one actually. And that's the moral choice that people have to make, and they put those things aside. And I think we also have a problem in the perception of our industry that there is it is seen that there are some very rich artists, and they assume everyone is very rich, and it's very hard work to convince people that that is not the case, and that for jobbing musicians and people who they might think made a lot of money, that they didn't, for a long period of time, that they might have had hits and sold reasonable quantities of albums and played reasonable sized venues, but they weren't making life-changing amounts of money, I don't think. And that's what we needed to do, educate the media and government and people like that about that. So it's not just, why does Paul McCartney need another pound? Well, he doesn't, but lots and lots of artists do.
So, on a personal level, has your time so far at the MMF changed your perspective on managers and management?
Yeah, I think it has. I don't think I had quite realised how much diversity there was, and frankly, lack of knowledge. I met someone recently, a manager of a successful act of the last 3-4 years. I said to him, how much PPL do you make then for your act? He said, I've no idea. Now, PPL is a major source of income. It must be a major source of income. And he doesn't know. I sit there and say to managers, well, how much are you making on a download then through iTunes, through your deal with X major record company? And they go, I don't know. And I sit there going, what do you mean you don't know? I don't understand it. When I've always had, maybe I'm a bit anal, but when I had Francis Dunnery and that, we used to get his publishing statement, I'd be going down and going, So that's 0.001 of a p for that stream, and then there's that on that. I wonder why that is then, and why isn't this? But as I said, everyone's different. No one has necessarily the time the time or the inclination to look at these things. That's where you get perhaps the older, more experienced manager who's been through it all before, who perhaps does have time to look at some of those things, and they do not like the way that some of the things are happening, but they have investigated it. But that's what the good thing is about the sharing of the knowledge. You can sit round a meeting of 20 managers and go, one of them will go, well, I only make this, and everyone else goes, do we? We better go and look at that. It happened last year. There was all the thing with the secondary ticketing and all that. And one manager put his hand out and said, I've just done a deal to get 50% of the what are they called? The booking fees back. And everyone's looking at him and going, you've only just done that, have you? Oh, okay. Because they've all been doing it for years.
Yeah.
But it's knowledge. But that's why, with so much to know, that a manager who needs to know 50 things, it's tough. It's tough to be on top of all of them.
So finally, if there's a a budding or current manager out there that is watching this and wants to join the MMF, how do they do that?
They do that by going online, putting in their credit card, filling out a form, and sending us their details, and then hopefully coming to some meetings and listening, learning, participating, sharing their experiences, but learning basically.
And the website address
is www.musicmanagersforum.co.uk. Although we might be changing our name, but at the moment that's what it is, and if you're watching this in 6 months, I'm sure there'll be a link.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us today, John, and letting us know about the work of the MMF.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for watching, and join us next time for more Cherry Red TV.